Welcome to the ITSPmagazine podcast network. You are about to listen to the Getting Technology Right, Ethics and Technology podcast with Dr. Kevin Macnish. Get ready for a conversation about global values and technology, diversity and inclusion, discrimination, transparency in data, privacy, and cybersecurity. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
So, hello and welcome to Getting Tech Right, the podcast about ethics and technology. My name is Kevin Macnish, and with me today is Marc Steen, Senior Research Scientist at the Netherlands Organisation for Applied Scientific Research. Marc has published very widely in ethics and human-centred design and the ethics of design. He's also the author of a new book, Ethics to People Who Work in Tech, which I have here. Great introductory book, I think, which is we'll be talking about today. So, Marc, hello. I gave you a very brief bio there, but could you flesh that out a little bit and tell us more about what you're involved in, what work you're doing right now?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Kevin. Maybe good to say a few words on my background. I studied industrial design engineering in Delft, and in a way, that's still with me. Some of the tenets of that education that was very much focused on organizing a process, an innovation process. And as becomes clear in the book while you go through it, it's very much a process-oriented approach. So I think of ethics not as a rubber stamp that you must collect, or an exam that you must pass, or a roadblock that you must pass, no, it's more like organizing a process of ethical reflection and deliberation, and I see that as my role to help people in technology, designers, developers, programmers, engineers, project managers, people marketing, other roles as well, to enable them to have a better vocabulary for ethics, to have a bit of structure for talking about ethics as a process, and even more. In Delft, we learned about an iterative process, a participatory process. So that's still with me. Also, in Delft is very important the ways to combine different disciplines. We used to call it multidisciplinary, but currently we call it transdisciplinary. It's even more than just combining the disciplines, but it's like the sum is more than the separate parts. So in the book, I also touch a bit on economics, a bit on psychology, like what is it when we say something has value? Has it economic value? Has it value for well-being? It's good to have conversations on ethics a bit broader sometimes. Obviously, it'll be about technology, about ethics, but a bit of legal, a bit of psychology, a bit of economics. It's sometimes helpful to get it into the dialogue. Furthermore, you asked me on the organization that I work for, TNO, the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research. It's almost 80 years old. It was established in the Netherlands as an institute between academia and industry, so to help translate academic knowledge into practical usage of that knowledge by the industry. 3,000 plus people work there, are my co-workers. We're with 3,000 plus people working in diverse domains, energy, mobility, ICT. The last 10 years or so, I specialized in hosting dialogues, enabling people to engage in the process of ethical reflection and deliberation. More specifically, when concerned with big data, algorithms, and what we currently often refer to as AI.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So how does TNO interact with businesses then? Because I think that's quite interesting. Is it a service which the Dutch government offers, or is it something which businesses come to TNO and say, we want to employ you, we'll pay you to use your services?
Yeah, it's both. It's both, actually. Yeah. If you imagine the business model is really simple. It's lots of costs for lots of people and a couple of machines in experimental environments, labs. But it's mainly people, of course. And then its incomes come from three sources. I think they're roughly equal: 1/3 from the government, 1/3 from European Union, European Commission, large projects. That's also a way to collaborate across countries. I just learned recently that the UK is re-entering the Horizon Europe research
We are
program.
indeed after a yes, ridiculous hiatus there while
Yeah,
everyone was
yeah.
trying to work out post-Brexit what the UK was going to do.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with it, and I'm sure that
Yes,
many people in the UK and also in the EU, of course, are happy with that.
very much
So that's
so.
that's 1/3, and the other third is by industry, and then
Mhm,
you can think of large and famous companies like ASML, the machine that makes the machines.
mhm,
I mean the factory that makes the machines that make the chip machines,
mhm.
um, and smaller businesses as well.
Right. Okay. No, that's really interesting. I don't think that there's an equivalent organization in the UK or the US.
In the UK, no. In Germany, yes. So on the continent, I often would say it's like Fraunhofer, but the
Okay.
Dutch.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Oh,
And for
nice.
your information, I think VTT in Finland, Sintef in Norway, if I'm not
Mm,
confusing Norway and Sweden. We have a couple of institutes like that, and they're together in the RTO, Research and Technology Organizations,
right.
something um, association, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So quite a sort of continental European approach, or maybe a North European approach. But it's a nice, yeah, a nice thing to have. So moving on to the book, what motivated you to write it now?
Mm. Yeah, I started writing it. I think when the pandemic started, so it was a
Mm,
good, for me, practical way of. Well, I'm sitting inside. I have my laptop. No, but the idea emerged many years before it. It's based on 20 years of research, last 10 years or so on. Not 20 years of research, 20 years of practice in diverse roles. Research, development, design, project management. Project management, I think, is also something that is throughout the book. It's
mm,
always doing ethics in a project team, in the practical context of there's a project, there's a deadline, there's a budget, there's a client, there are requirements, and then how to combine concerns for ethics with all the other concerns for quality, for timely delivery, for technology. Um, your question, what motivated me? It's really the first audience that I had in mind were my colleagues, were my coworkers,
mm,
because increasingly they were turning to me. Initially, they were coming to me with the question, "Hey, Mark, you're something ethics. Can you help us make our project more ethical?" And that was always a question that I understood. They have that question, but I was reluctant to reply in that direct way because I would explain to them, I'm not in a position to, well, to give you this rubber stamp,
mm,
to make you pass this exam, to give you the green checkbox. It's ethical or not. It's really, yeah, it's your call. Uh, and I would then help them make more or less time and space within their project uh, to put ethical questions on the regular agenda of their regular project meetings. And I think for topics like privacy or bias, fairness, non-discrimination, for transparency or accountability or explainability. I mean, these are not synonyms, of course, but they're
mm.
in the same direction. Uh, it is relatively easy to then give them a vocabulary and a bit of structure to deal with those topics in their projects. So the algorithm, of course, it uses data. Where did the data come from? What about people's privacy? What about fairness? Is there bias in the data that were used to train the machine learning model? Yes. And how do we mitigate? And transparency, can we look into the model? Well, for deep learning, it's more difficult than for a simple algorithm that you can look into and inspect. Um, so, yeah, and there are books on ethics for technologists. One great book is by Van der Poel and Royacker. That's like the standard book in the 4 universities of technology in the Netherlands and many more universities internationally. Yeah, but I want to make something that's even more accessible,
Mhm.
with more examples, with little exercises in it, like what you can do in your own project, a bit of fiction. I don't know whether you came across those, but there are lots of fun writing those. There's 4 pieces of fiction to accompany 4 main chapters in the middle of the book, where I deal with 4 useful ethical perspectives: consequentialism, duty ethics, relational ethics, virtue ethics. And I want to make them a bit more, lively, as if it were stories that you could also emotionally engage with.
Mhm.
So those were the first bits of the book I wrote because I had fun
Right.
writing them. And they're not completely fictional. They could have
Mhm.
happened in some project by me and other people,
Yes,
with a
yes.
bit of, with a bit of details. Yeah, but I mean, they're realistic.
Oh, definitely. I enjoyed reading them for precisely that reason. It did help to bring some of those issues to life, and doing it in a more interesting way than some of the more traditional approaches. So I like, you sort of started out by talking about, or sort of demythologizing some of the stuff around self-driving cars and the trolley problem and things like that. And let's look at some more realistic
Yeah.
situations we might be dealing
That was
with.
also a chapter that I really loved. Right. I mean, just recently I read 2 great books of professors, one UK, one US, explaining AI to the broader public,
Mm.
um, and a little bit of surprise on my side. Like, really? Half a chapter devoted to the trolley problem. I mean, it's a thought experiment from when I was born in
Yeah.
1967. It's never meant as a calculation problem or an optimization problem that you can ask a
Mm.
computer to solve for you. Like, have we now solved? No, we have not
Yes.
solved. It was a thought experiment. And then indeed, like you say, but for the people who are going to read the book, I will not explain. I mean, I will not give away too much. But essentially, what I often do is, if everybody zoomed in, I zoom out.
Mm.
So you can zoom on one person with one lever, choosing for the track with 5 people, through choosing for the track with 1 people. Whom shall I kill? Shall I kill the one, or shall I let the trolley kill the 5? I mean, it's an
Mm.
interesting question for a couple of minutes. But then I zoom out, like, what was wrong with the brake system anyways? Was there
Yeah.
no maintenance? What about the people who know about maintenance? Were they laid off? What is this with privatization? Was there no governance on the safety and the labor conditions of the people on the track? So, and that, of course, is too many questions. That's
Mm.
zoomed out too much, but it just gives a bit more broader perspective. Also, I wouldn't like, if I were a technologist, I don't like it if my job looks like too focused. Like, is there really one detail only that I can talk about? I want a bit of more design space that I can
Mm.
try to influence positively.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, I think, and as you say, it adds to the realism of the situation, because the thought experiment is, as you say, a very limited experiment for precisely that reason, to explore our intuitions and what we're trying to do and what our natural feelings are. And I think it works well there. But as you say, when it goes into the broader context of, I think there's probably some excitement in the early days of, oh, this is something philosophy can contribute to AI, that's not talking about Skynet and machines taking
Oh
over the
yeah,
world.
yeah, sure. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great starting point,
Yeah,
but it shouldn't
excellent.
end there. Like, have we now
Yes.
solved the trolley problem?
I've got to admit, I've never heard anybody say that, but that's quite a worrying concept, that we might have solved it.
Sometimes you can run into people, they're deep into quantifying the pluses
Mm.
and the minuses, and then also delegating that calculation to a machine, to an autonomous system, and then it should calculate
Yeah.
what's good and bad in terms of the pluses and minuses that it can access, and weigh against each other. And yes, also the other, I mean, there's something to say for that. There are machines that you hope will operate reliably, precisely because they can also operate autonomously for a while. If the radio
Mm.
contact is lost, if they're in a very difficult environment where people can't go, if there's a time lag between the operator seeing what the camera sees. I mean, there's something to say for such a machine, to such a robot, often, of course, to make some pluses and minuses, trade off, and then decide what to do. before the operator has a chance, realistically, to have meaningful human control, as it is called.
Yes, and that's obviously a problem with, or a challenge, I should say, with some technologies, particularly in the military, where you're thinking about the speed at which things happen is so fast that having a human in the loop becomes very difficult, because you can't then have that level of control. And instead you put the human on the loop, and then you are delegating some of that moral decision making to the automated system.
Yeah, that's an excellent example indeed. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, in the final section of the book, you talk more about human-centered design, value-sensitive design, and responsible innovation, which I think fits really nicely with what you've been saying about this sort of process approach. Could you talk about each of those and how they differ?
Oh yeah. It's maybe not so necessary that they differ. I was just looking at three things that I've encountered many times in industry. Human-centered design, sometimes referred to as user-centered design, but I prefer the human-centered because, well, there's the role of being a user, but that person will also be a friend, a father, an employee, so different roles. So talk about human-centered captures a little bit more on that. It's a well-established approach in the industry, typically involving participation of the putative or potential end users in the design of the system or the product or the service. It's also iterative very much, so that enables agile or scrum approaches. And then my proposal is rather simply, you have your human-centered design or your sprint or your agile anyways.
Yeah.
In it, you can relatively easily integrate a couple of ethical questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The other one, value-sensitive design, as well as the name suggests, already an explicit focus on helping the participants in the workshop, for example, to talk about values more explicitly. I also have in the chapter a bit of critique on value-sensitive design. It's a great method. However, how shall I put this? Sometimes values and interests are conflated. Like somebody would talk about, this is an important value for us, but underneath is also an interest. And with it comes a power and a relationship and a difference in power of the different stakeholders or people around the table. So my main concern with value-sensitive design is, if done well, it will acknowledge the role of power between the actors. And if that is not taken into account, power and power differences, yeah, it can be like naive. You did your 2 hours workshop. We now have clarity on the values that are important. Yeah, but what about power? Because power is ultimately, no, not ultimately, from the start already, and ultimately, it defines what gets done with the results of such a workshop. Another thing that is immediately connected to this critique of what about power is inclusion, diversity, participation. Like, so you have your value-sensitive design workshop, but one person may be missing, but maybe nobody's noticing that that person is missing, because implicitly it would have been weird if that person would have been invited. But why would it be weird? So the unusual suspects, I think those are my main concerns with value-sensitive design. But still, if you do that, if you're more conscious on who do I invite and include, and whom do I unconsciously, unintentionally exclude and not invite, and if you also find a way to deal with power, for example, give also the floor, give a bit of room to this marginalized voice, then value-sensitive design can be great. Third one, responsible innovation. It's a term that emerged in Brussels 10 years ago, I think. It's similar to technology assessment in its ambition to think about the potential implications and impacts of a technology already during development. It has been used for emerging technologies like nanotechnology or bio something or GMOs. I often refer to a paper by Jack Stilgo et al. 2013, where they identify 4 key dimensions of responsible innovation. So anticipation, responsiveness. Am I now forgetting the third one and the fourth one? I was going to focus on the first two, to anticipate and to respond. What could go wrong? What could go wrong is often something that you need to be careful about how to voice it, because often when I'm in a project, either as a project team member or as an advisor or a consultant, there's a tendency to be positive about the technology because maybe it'll do something good. That's the purpose. We're working hard to get it working. We're working hard to get it implemented with the client. So I'm always sensitive, hopefully enough sensitive to how do I phrase questions so that it doesn't sound immediately like you can't do that.
Yes,
it will go wrong. Because that will just, I mean, people don't like hearing that. Obviously, I wouldn't like hearing that the other way around. So I try to find ways to put questions like anticipation and responsiveness on the table for them to engage with. And there will always be a couple of people in the room who have also wondered, and now we have a bit of space to voice those concerns.
Right. Yeah, I think you're spot on there with the fact that so often ethicists can be sort of seen as the values police that come in and just and there's this sort of fear that you're going to close down the project or just say you can't do this rather than actually helping the project along and helping it to move faster. And
exactly.
that was one of the things I quite liked when you were talking about the perceived problems with the responsible innovation. You said it's often perceived that it can slow a project down, but in actual fact, it often can speed the project up. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about that as well. How could this sort of ethics engagement help a project, either in terms of speed or in terms of quality?
Yeah, that's a nice question. Just to come back to your remark, the ethicist, I never introduce or frame or identify as an ethicist. I'm just an engineer. I'm interested in ethical questions.
That probably diffuses some of that concern then at the very beginning.
How responsible innovation can actually help speed up or improve the quality rather than slowing it down. I think it's both true. But I think in the end, the speeding up wins because it will take a couple of hours or a couple of weeks if you plan it carefully, in lead time, in budget spent. It will take something. It will cost something, but it will pay back. And there's a parallel that we can draw with human-centered design or user-centered design, where just imagine all the technology people focusing on their work, getting the machine working, getting it out to the market on time, which is great. And only then, near the end, or at the end, or after the end, doing the usability tests or the focus group, and then then all the budget is spent in the wrong direction, or incorrectly, or inefficiently. And then Jacob Nielsen, I think it was, or Donald Norman, but they could have said it both, like the usability gurus. They would have many examples of, actually, it's very wise to spend some time or even more time in the beginning to explore those topics because it will pay back. And there's one example, but that's from many years ago. I think I do it in the book. The new business people of the KPN Telecom, the incumbent telecom operator of the Netherlands, was exploring something new business. And then I did only 3 focus groups with 6 people each, so 18 people only, and then from a quantitative experimental research, that would have been like, it's a small sample, but in this area of exploration, focus group, usability, needs of people, interests of people, it's more than enough to just find out there's no need for this one. We've looked at it from many sides. There's just no real benefits. And then while I was finishing off my 20-minute presentation, he was picking up his phone and canceling the project. And that still for me is like a great example of also the courage first of this commissioner, this client, to ask me to look at it critically. Secondly, to do something with the results. In a way, my book and all its insights in it can only work if people turn to the book, use it in practice, and what they find in practice in the workshops that they organize themselves, or the questions that they ask, or the dialogues they facilitate, we have to do something with it. Otherwise, it's philosophy in the in the negative caricatural sense of the word.
Yes, it comes back to being its own thought experiment in a way of, let's just explore what this might look like, as you say. So yes, do you find with people coming to you, this kind of goes back to the point you made about technologists generally taking a very positive view about the technology they're creating, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We're all in this field because we care about technology, we care about people, we want to improve people's lifestyles, improve the quality of life, etc., etc. And so, as you say, there can be this negative response when you start talking about ethics, a very defensive response of, but I'm not trying to do anything evil. I'm not I'm not going out creating bombs or trying to hurt people or anything like that. So I sometimes find that can lead to a level of defensive-ness with people that sit there and think, are you calling me evil? So have you come across that? And if so, how do you deal with that?
No, I haven't come across it in such a manner because, as I said, I'm careful in how I'm introduced to the project, how I introduce myself to the project, very much on their side, only helping them to make more explicit what they are already concerned with. So that's also why they turn to me. I cannot come into a project uninvited and then just barge in and speak. It's because we both want to collaborate and improve the project as a whole.
And I like the point you made as well about the fact that there are probably several people in the room already thinking about this and already thinking about these issues, and that by creating the space and the safety, that allows them to start to
a bit of space, a bit of time is often all that is needed to organize, and then from it, with a bit of vocabulary, a bit of structure, well, you can learn that from a book or from other books or other methods, that will just enable them to do that.
Excellent. No, thanks. It's been really, really interesting. Is there, in the final few minutes, is there anything that we've not covered, that we've not talked about, that you'd like to add, or that you'd like to sort of bring to people's attention?
No, I will not summarize 4 chapters, but I will.
Go for it.
But very briefly. No, the core of the book is 4 chapters on these 4 main ethical perspectives, and I explain lots about them, but I can summarize them like one way to look at. So you have your product on the table, so to say, and often we start a rapid ethical deliberation session with, can somebody describe what we're working on? What will it look like practically? Who will use it? What will be its effects on the customers, if it is a customer-facing application, or on society, or on institutions, or values? So somebody explains that in 5 minutes. It's good to have that. Then the common reference, and then we look at it from 4 perspectives, and really they are like the compass directions. First one is relatively easy and accessible for people, the pluses and minuses. The benefits that it could offer, the costs, the risks that are also involved. And often there's an interesting exercise to draw the system boundaries a bit larger for ChatGTP. There's also the gig workers in Kenya who had to do this work to clean up the data. There's also the materials that go into, that come from a mine somewhere in Africa, that go to the NVIDIA chips, etc. So that's the first one, is relatively accessible, also for technology-oriented people, plus and minuses. Second one is duties, duty perspective, duty ethics, deals with duties and rights. That's often also accessible, especially if people have a legal background, because there's human rights, there's obligations. Interestingly, they can sometimes look as contradictory. So imagine, for safety, we need to hang up cameras on the street, but our privacy, so the security, the city must protect and promote security, safety, and the citizens have the right for privacy. So you cannot solve that, no, but you can if you look creatively at new technologies, and they've been on the market for many years already. So there's data minimization, there's privacy enhancing technologies, there's ways to throw away the data every 24 hours. So that's a nice way to also spark creativity. Sometimes we can combine conflicting concerns. Third one is relational ethics. Related to feminist ethics, in that it also helps to ask questions on power. So an algorithm, say that a government agency uses an algorithm to point to people who potentially committed fraud with some welfare services. There was this infamous kinderopvangtoeslagen schandaal. I don't know how that translates in English, but
I'm not sure.
child benefits.
So it was something
disaster.
like child benefit. Yeah, it was child benefit fraud, wasn't it? The algorithm was assuming people were.
It was
fraudulent.
assuming, and there were too many false positives, and they were like really hurt in their family life, in their private life. So relational ethics perspective will look at what happens to this interaction between, well, some inspector with not necessarily evil intentions, just out there to try to find fraud, because throwing away tax money to fraud is not a good idea. And on the other hand, well-behaving innocent people and the false positive. So it looks at that. And also how then the power, because if there's, for example, no transparency in the algorithm, or if there are no effective ways to look into the algorithm and to get redress and repair, which is unfortunately the case, then there's just too much power on one side and the other. So that's the third one. Fourth one is virtue ethics, and I learned a lot from Shannon Veller in that. I love very much the way that she puts it, like we can look at technologies, applications, services as tools that people can use to cultivate virtues that are necessary in our modern contemporary world, or the other way around, that can corrode effectively those virtues. So social media is a relatively easy example. Social media apps, Facebook, Twitter, are typically designed by hundreds of psychologists somewhere in Silicon Valley, with notifications, with beeps, with colors, with gamification, with badges, levels, what have you, to get you hooked to it. Their business model is based on grabbing people's attention, holding their attention, monetizing it. And the flip side of that it corrodes people's abilities and indeed their virtue for self-control. Because 2 hours later, what am I doing? Am I still in Facebook? So that's, and then you can imagine another business model and another app that would say, hey, Mark, it looks like you're going to Wikipedia, for example. How long do you want to spend? And then after 2 minutes, the beep goes off. Yeah, so it's a nudge in the other direction. Now maybe do something more useful than being in your mobile phone trance. And lastly, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about content. The virtue ethics perspective also has a side that is turned to the technologists. So if you're working on a project which involves an algorithm to detect fraud, you need justice yourself, the sense and indeed the virtue to promote justice, and possibly courage to raise your hand in your meeting and to voice this concern, like, are we sure about this bias, that it is very small, because I've looked into it, and it'll cost some weeks to repair, but I think we need, is there room for it? So courage is often explained as doing something difficult, but doing it nevertheless. So I like very much that, and that's also how I end the book, with a proposal for 15 or so virtues that technologists can, and I would say need to, but you can choose, of course, for yourself which virtues to cultivate, how to cultivate. Mine is creativity, curiosity. Those are my I also call them superpowers, just to make it more. Yeah, yeah. That's my nudge towards the reader. Don't think of them like virtues as some Victorian modesty or prudence. Yeah, they're there. They're not. They're not wrong. But you can think of more contemporary, like curiosity, creativity, collaboration, empowerment. These are also virtues that technologists may want to cultivate within themselves if they want to deliver products that also radiate out these same virtues into the world.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Marc. That's been really, really helpful. I'm really glad for that final section as well, bringing that together. That's been really nice. So thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Again, the book is Ethics for People Who Work in Tech by Marc Steen. It will be there in the show notes, a link to the book or a way to be able to get hold of it, published by Routledge, at least in the, was it Routledge? CRC Press, who I think are part of Routledge.
They're sister of Routledge, so both are in the Taylor and Francis group, but they're very similar in the.
Right,
they're both Taylor and Francis. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So yes, we will put a link to that in the notes. And thank you again, Marc, for your time. It's been a real pleasure chatting.
Thanks a lot, Kevin, for the invitation. It's my pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Getting Technology Right, Ethics and Technology podcast with Dr. Kevin Macnish, part of the ITSPmagazine podcast network. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player. Subscribe to the ITSPmagazine YouTube channel and share the ITSPmagazine podcast network with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to our conversations and our audience, visit ITSPmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.